the sense sphere. You must listen to our demands.
Welcome, one and all. Do you know, I should start the show like that, but nobody can do it like John Pertwee, can they? I mean, yes. We've got at least two panelists today who were actually at that event in Non-Late 83. Not that that's our topic today, but might get mentioned. You never know. So good to find you again. 3 in a row. Hat trick. I tell you what, I'm ready for football. Starts tomorrow. That's when I want to see Middlesbrough score a hat trick. Right. So good to see you all. Here we go again. This time, this is our Minds of the Matrix. And, you know, I try and have this a bit differently. All the way through the week, we've actually been referencing Remembrance of the Daleks. We've been referencing the Sylvester Doctor. And actually, while we were discussing, I thought, do you know what? I want to do a deep dive more into what type of Doctor should we have? What type of Doctor? Should the Doctor reflect the times the Doctor's produced in? You know, that kind of slightly more explorative question I wanted to do. So let's just set us up and take us through my kind of usual housekeeping. So this should be our repository of all Time Lord knowledge, the Matrix. As you know, last week I had Divine and Dragon and John Daly on, 2 well-informed Whovians, and they will return. In fact, John might return today. Today I welcome Simon Lydiard and Michael Ball, who many may know Simon, many may know from Fandom and Skaro fanzine, amongst other things. I will show you in a moment. I'm waving my Sonic here, threatening. It's a lethal weapon, you know. Now, in these Minds of the Matrix discussions, I do want to be a bit looser with the format and have those proper Doctor Who chats that can go in many directions. So please do join us in the thread with the banter and the memories and the questions, as if you are in that imaginary pub with other Doctor Who fans speculating, reminiscing, debating all points on Doctor Who. Now, as I said, after a week of streams on Sylvester and that, I just thought this was the question to have. Okay, so you can see the other night, yesterday, we had the Doctor Who Detox, which was all Sylvester McCoy, and we were talking about the convention over there that our friends on Sirens of Audio are organising. Obviously, on Wednesday night, it was Remembrance of the Daleks, and we were looking there at how the Andrew Cartmel plan was starting to come together. Now, I'm doing these for a reason, aren't I? Give us a like hike now, switch on your notifications. And of course, I'm going to ask, give us a subscription. I tell you what, it would keep my partner happy, you know, him indoors. If he thinks I'm spending too much time on here creating content and I'm not getting extra subs, you know what's going to happen. I'm going to lose the argument. So away, get more subs going now, please. Otherwise, I'll have to go missing. And of course, 2 places are my favorites there. Go on X at Censorsphere, DM me there. Loads of people are emailing me at censorsphere@gmail.com with suggestions, wanting to come on as a panelist, etc. It's brilliant. So please keep me informed. Right. That's out the way. Minds of the Matrix, that's plural. I can't big myself up, so I need to actually introduce my friends today, the repository of all knowledge. So first of all, I want to say a great welcome to Simon Lydiard. Hello.
Hi, Brendan. Good to see you, and hopefully all your viewers.
Yeah, now we're going to test whether you're a repository in a minute. No, I mean, obviously, you're founder of Skaro fanzine. I'm going to say it again in case people didn't hear me the first time. I think loads of Doctor Who fans of a certain age will have a copy of that.
I've got a few copies.
And of course, I was saying the other day, you can see references to them in that great book that's been published. What's that book called again? I've forgotten it.
the fanzine book, the one produced by David J. Howe's company.
That's it.
Yeah.
So there we go. So Simon goes back in fandom way further than me. So it's going to be interesting discussion. And of course, we had him last on Wednesday night. It's Michael back again. He's got his own channel.
Sir. Yes, how you doing? Twice in 1 week. That's not bad going, is it?
It isn't. Simon, he's got his own channel, but Michael said he's having a rest at the moment, and he's been on our channel twice this week. So
I know. We're having a quiet week at home, and so my podcast colleague is busy. So I thought I'd come on, and I've got the time, so here I am. So
it's a funny sort of rest you're having.
Yeah.
You're like that doctor in the TARDIS who says, let's go to the Eye of Orion, and you end up having to do some dodgy watercolour paints in Wales. I mean, what was that about?
Yeah, it's weird. It's just like I said, because unfortunately my wife's working this week, so I'm at home a lot, and I get kind of a bit stir crazy. So, Brendan, you invite me on and I can talk away. So here I am.
Well, this is it. This is how it works. I was only talking to Simon 2 days ago, and he's on today. So if anybody emails me, you can watch it. So I said I'd be checking your credentials, not really, but as Doctor Who fans, I just want to kind of, before we go right into this discussion about the type of doctor, etc., I think it's always good to know where are you coming from. So Simon, I've got a few photographs here. You don't have to respond to them per se, but basically, where was your launch pad into Doctor Who? Where did you start?
Well, I certainly started watching during the Troughton era. I can't really remember exactly when, but I can tell you my first memory of Doctor Who is from Wheel in Space. I can remember the sort of egg-like things, the spheres the Cybermen were in. So I definitely can remember that. But from Spearhead from Space onwards, I can remember pretty much every episode, apart from the ones that I wasn't allowed to watch.
Oh, right, really?
Well, I certainly remember on one occasion going to tea at a friend's house, and it was during Day of the Daleks, and his parents thought that it was too frightening. So there was one episode of Day of the Daleks I missed, and one episode of Terror of the Zygons when we were late coming back from holiday. But apart from those two episodes, I certainly can remember watching every episode from Spearhead onwards.
It's interesting you saying that you saw a bit of the Wheel in Space, but you properly started Spearhead onwards, because I always say to people, I saw maybe one episode of Day of the Daleks, I saw one or two of Sea Devils, but I really started, I think, the last season of Pertwee. That seems to be so. Yeah, you kind of dip in and out, but you're not in charge of the telly. You're a little kid. But of course, and I was intrigued when you said, whether you're allowed or not. And of course, it was his friend's parents, because my mum and dad were in the kitchen making tea. And the advantage for all kids was they didn't see this perilous, dangerous, threatening content we were getting every week.
Yeah, I never hid behind the sofa, though. I know that's like a common trope that people were scared of it and hid behind the sofa. I loved being scared. I really enjoyed it.
Michael, what was your launch pad into Doctor Who?
I was just looking. It was season 18. I think it was State of Decay. It was the episode where Romana ends up with this spider jumping on her face.
Oh, the marsh spiders.
That's it, the marsh spiders, right? And I remember I was really young. I remember going to bed absolutely bloody terrified. and that's when I got onto it. And then I think they often say that you actually, one of the most important doctors is the one that you grow up with. And for me, it was Tom Baker was right at the end, but it was Peter Davison's era.
Yeah.
So the 80s, especially early 80s, sort of Peter Davison, Colin Baker era were my favourites, although obviously each era has good ones. But that first memory, that was it. I was hooked, terrified. But then that's part of the appeal of Doctor Who when you're younger. It's the scare factor.
Yeah.
And you come back for the next episode the week after, and the week after, and the week after, and all the cliffhangers. And that was it. I was hooked, and here I am all these years later.
Now, did both of you, before I go to the thread, did both of you also find that you could actually out yourself at school as a Doctor Who fan?
Some of the time. It's at junior school, yes. That was kind of during the Pertwee era. The program was really popular. Pretty much at senior school, a little bit variable.
I was always more self-conscious. I mean, I'm a big fan of not just Doctor Who, but lots of other series as well. I was always more of what they're known as a closet geek, where I'd be a big fan of it, but I wouldn't tell too many of my mates because they'd take the mickey. So I didn't want to, but at the time, I went to a Southwest London school, and it was a bit rough and ready, and you don't always say that to your mates, and they just take the mickey out of you. And that, you know what I mean?
The big challenge
was in Southwest London at the moment. I'll hear no word against it.
Oh no, nothing against it either. But that's where I was growing up. Yeah.
My big challenge was when Doctor Who Weekly came out, and then obviously Doctor Who Monthly. I just started secondary school, and actually it was literally, I think it was September '79, and so, you know, oh my gosh, there's a magazine comic for me, and then of course, but. The best news agents to get it was on the way home from school after seeing my gran, and of course I've got 3, 4, 5 lads with me before we get on the bus, and of course, do I buy them weekly and they see me buy it or not? And
you can always wrap it in something less reputable.
You know, and this is what I mean. I mean, it's like, you know, people joke in the 70s and 80s that all dirty men would go to some.
I was going to say, you're going in a news agent, you're coming out with a magazine in a plastic bag, and of course you're coming out with a Doctor Who magazine.
Yeah. I mean, I was ahead of my time. I mean, but I know it was so funny how that. I remember trying to smuggle the Doctor Who magazine. Sometimes I'd get the magazine in the morning. That was a sneaky thing. Get off the bus, get it in the morning. But then you had a school day, and you didn't want the magazine to be ripped. Or when you had PE and all your towels in your bag and that. Oh,
yeah.
I just, I mean, way prior to Doctor Who magazine, one thing which I really wanted was the Doctor Who Radio Times 10th anniversary special.
Oh yeah,
when that came out in 1973, I can't remember how much it was.
I remember buying the 20th anniversary special Radio Times.
Well, I could not afford the 10th anniversary special at the time it came out.
Okay.
I think my pocket money was 10 pence a week.
Yeah.
I think it was maybe 25 pence, something like that. I've got it now.
Yeah.
but at the time, I was really upset because I couldn't afford it.
Oh.
Yeah, and this is what I mean. It you know, we can talk about Doctor Who and we can get very theoretical about it, but the point is, it's the love of the show. Where did it start? And as I try and say in a lot of my texts to people, there should be more that unites us and divides us when fandom gets a bit silly.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But I want to show you these 2 pictures because, again, as I was starting off point, if you're a Doctor Who fan, what was your Bible? You know, in those very early days, what was your first book or 2 that you just actually read all the blooming time? Mine was the one on the right, the Doctor Who monster book. I managed to get that with, like you was talking about pocket money, Simon. I must have really doubled up, I think. And I think I did a job on my dad and said, look, this is really important. It's got colour. And it's just, and yes, that book, I mean, it's really bedraggled now, but oh my God, it was the monster book. But I've put that one on the left because I think that's from the 60s. And some people may recognize that.
Yeah.
I've got both of those.
Have you?
I do, but the one that was sort of the Bible was the making of Doctor Who, the Piccolo. I think there's a Piccolo edition. Again, I still have that. That was rather wonderful.
Now, we had Malcolm Hulke's biographer on recently. He'll be back on again. Yes, we were talking about the making of Doctor Who because Malcolm Hulke wrote it, didn't he? He was very helpful to help writers get on the ladder. Very, very useful.
He wrote a book called Writing for Television.
That's it. Yeah.
Which was yes, it was kind of like an instruction book to television script writers.
Just out of interest, that book on the left, it's got the movie Daleks, not the TV Daleks.
Yeah.
So, just a trivial thing, but yeah, I would have thought they would have done a TV version of the Daleks rather than the Peter Cushing one, but I don't know. Just an observation from that image, that's all.
I think it's because at the time, lots of the color, really good quality color photographs of the Daleks were from the movies.
Oh, got you. That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so in a lot of the merchandise, they would default to color photographs from the movies, whereas the BBC on-set photographer normally works in black and white.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Now, I'm just going to say hello to the thread because they're going to tell us all their starting points. I mean, I can never say these names. It always gets me going. Chalulu or somebody. Grace. I remember Dalek Survival Handbook. I do. Yes, I remember that. The Dalek. Yes, because there's a picture in it. You know, there's certain pictures that just stick with you. Early pictures. I was just talking to Simon before we started about key pictures. You know, when you're archiving and doing fanzines and stuff. The Dalek Survival Handbook had one from the Chase, I think it was, and they're all. The companions are all low down, and there's a Dalek overlooking them. I think it's the Chase. But yes, the Dalek Survival Handbook, Triple Jazz in Tasmania, the Monster Book I loved. I got teased by an entire class. Oh, stick with us, mate. Lee Smith, oh yes, the Doctor Who Monster Book was it. It was an early one for me. That was the earliest kind of archive I could get. Let's have a look. I also wanted to show you this. Because I mean, gosh, this was hardback. You know, I'm going to have to sound, you know, very working class here. This was hardback, and I got it for Christmas off my aunt and uncle, and it was from St. Michael's, you know, Marks and Spencer's special, and it had the full stories, didn't it, of Genesis and Planet of the Daleks in, but the illustrations and the scripts and the photo, and it was glossy. Now, so I had the Monster Book. I think I got the making of Doctor Who a bit later, actually, and then this came at Christmas. Now, I'd have to say, this was just manna from heaven for me.
It's lovely graphics, isn't it? Looks really good from the design of it, the way they actually drew it.
It's strange as well because, as you said, Brendan, the imprint was St. Michael, which was Marks and Spencer's, which I mean, some people may not know. Marks and Spencer's is a kind of a department store, an upmarket. Well, I would call it upmarket department store, and they didn't tend to do this sort of thing, although they did for a while in the 70s publish some books. And it was just odd to see a Doctor Who book in that kind of upmarket department store.
It was. I'm surprised it's not worth more now. You know, when you look things up, because it's quite a heavy and a detail. I would just sit in bed, read. Planet of the Daleks is my favorite story as a kind of comfort blanket. Obviously, there's better ones and everything. Genesis is better in many ways, but Planet of the Daleks is just cozy. I like going into the basement floor when it's darker and you're trapped, you know. And so reading that in bed, you know, is fantastic.
This is the one that works for you. That's the one that you go back to or whatever. Yeah,
it is. But today, I mean, I've got PB props saying, welcome, what we're talking about today, right? Well, we've warmed up now. Warmed up. It's all downhill now. So let me just get the graphic ready. It's a bit slow today. I'm not quite sure why. So I set the question. Well, I say I set the question. It sounds as though I should say the truth. I set the trolls off again. So does 2024 Doctor Who need to be emotional or dark? Of course, it's not even a binary question, that, because they're not opposites of each other. But I set the parameters within that. I don't know what my answer is yet. I know I have certain theories on what RTD is saying, but that's different. So yes, we're going to be talking about that PB props. So just to give us a context, I've got about 3 slides to kind of set us up where we are, and then we'll go, as I said, organically anywhere the panelists and the thread take me. So just to set it up again, of course, I think it was in May, because as you know, I do saloons on this. Russell Davies was talking about, he was thinking about what a terrible world it is now and how many stresses of mental health there are in young people. I wanted a hero who wasn't closed, who wasn't all stiff upper lip. So I wanted a hero who felt more. Okay, that's his philosophy there. Stephen Moffat then tweeted later about Russell Davies, and he said that he wanted people, particularly a younger audience, to know that they can express their emotions in an open, healthy way. He's a lot more in touch with his emotions, quite right too. Okay, so that's one element of the context. Obviously, RTD explained a bit more what he meant, why we needed an emotional doctor. He said these are dark times, and he actually framed it with, I do think the world is darkening around queer rights. So I don't know if, at first I thought he was talking nuclear weapons and everything, because we were in the 80s. But you know, but he's talking about that, queer rights, as he calls it. I hate using that word, but anyway, I'm beginning to worry about where we are in society. There is a hero out there cutting his way through the universe. Okay. And then just to kind of make sure we've got a nice kind of backdrop to this, where I was going to go with this. Yes, it was the second paragraph. Davies was saying they weren't exactly the straightest men in the past. This is the Doctor characters, which I think he's pushing it there a bit. I mean, they had eccentric cause, and he said they always had a lightness and a joy. It chimes with what he calls his queer energy. We're not delivering a neutered Doctor anymore. Okay. And then, as you know, with my little parodies of RTD, but when he was talking about the first openly queer Doctor, as he put it, it's his words, in terms of the representation, I think the Doctor's an alien. He's an alien sexual. It's like Alien. This all doesn't bother us for a second, and we barely talked about it in the cast, in the program, actually. It's 2024. It is what you do, and then you move forward. So I just wanted to kind of set up what our showrunner has been talking about so people can understand why I've asked the question, so to speak. I'll deliver 2 more sentences, and then please come flying in. What I found fascinating when I started framing this question, though, is... okay, if that's his philosophy and he's allowed to do it as the showrunner, why does he want an emotional Doctor in 2024 Dark Times when Mel is very strong? Ruby Sunday is very strong. So in other words, his response to Dark Times is the companions are much stronger, but the Doctor is more emotionally,
So a flip side of how it used to be, where the Doctor used to be the strongest, and the companion was the one that was screaming and getting upset and getting emotional. So they flipped it completely the opposite way around.
And I'm not understanding that, because I'm thinking surely RTD you can get what you want, which is show the audience how to respond in these dark times through Ruby, through Mel. But the Doctor's still the Doctor, alien, as he says. But I don't know why he added the alien sexual bit. This
is very interesting, actually, because one thing about the 13th Doctor was, when I watched it, it was more like she was just part of the team TARDIS. She wasn't actually the one that was leading. She was just like another companion. And now we're just thinking about the way you're talking about this now. There is a parallel where the Doctor isn't really the person that's like the leader, the one that we've got to do this. They're almost kind of like unequal to the companion in some ways, even lesser than the companion in some ways, in some episodes. And I hadn't really thought about that change. And obviously, since Peter Capaldi, he was still the last Doctor who I really liked, who stood out as the Doctor. But I wonder whether there was just a generalization that there's a change. I know obviously Chibnall and Russell T Davies have actually done their own interpretation, but there are some parallels with the Doctor. Doesn't stand out so much as the Doctor, the leader, the person that you want to travel with. It's more like a mate, an emotional mate. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, but it's interesting though, because I think throughout the program's history, the Doctor has been the leader in whatever capacity, and the character has demonstrated different leadership tendencies over the years, but there are various models of leadership. And one model of leadership which is becoming increasingly popular, which I quite respect, is this idea of the leader as more of a follower leadership. So the leader doesn't dominate as much. So I think you were kind of posing the question about should the Doctor be emotional or dark? How does it fit in with the times we're living in? Concepts of leadership have changed over the years, and I think there's much less of a focus now. Well, there isn't, because it happens in different places, but there's been a rise in a sense of leaders should not be the really strong, dominant, overbearing figures, that they should be more enabling. So I suppose, and I really love, Michael, your point about the 13th felt like being more a member of the team. It's interesting you've got the picture of Patrick Troughton up there as well. Patrick Troughton's Doctor was clearly the leader, but he wasn't dominant. He did enable people. And yes, I think probably the Doctor at the moment is more of an enabling figure. But I also love the fact that Russell is talking about having a character whom people can look to, but kind of basically says you can be who you are as well. Is not a judgmental figure.
Right.
And hopefully enables people to think I can be more self-actualizing.
It's an interesting point, and I don't poo-poo it. Actually, what I think I have sometimes found problematic about where he seems to be wanting to steer it, given what you've said, is it's the dynamic also with the companion-centric narrative arcs. So basically, it's called Doctor Who. That's the name on the tin. But for the whole series, we're focused very heavily on the companion. And then added to that, if the Doctor's showing a different kind of leadership model that you've just explained, I don't know if I'm really seeing the Doctor character as central, pivotal, influential, even in more subtle ways, as you were explaining.
I agree. The Doctor doesn't seem to have that centralized presence that he used to have, or she used to have. Well, mostly he. And I don't know why, whether that's just specifically Russell T Davies's agenda, or whether that's just how he feels that this Doctor should be. And I suppose that they might just be trying to change generally the whole dynamic of how Doctor Who is in 2024.
I mean, Michael, I'll even widen it further, because it's not. I'm not having a bite at RTD. It's the whole of New Who, because Moffat's done the same. A good man goes to war. Am I a good man? The Doctor challenging himself suddenly. So he's, suddenly he's no longer got high status, really, because he doesn't even know if he's a decent person.
Self-evaluation of himself, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of that since 2005.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah, that is more of a New Who trait. Yeah,
but I like what Simon said, and I understand it, and I agree. There have to be different role models of leadership out there than we saw in the past. Otherwise, we have this very patrician setup, very William Hartnell-esque, really.
Yeah.
Well, interesting as well with the last series. There were quite a few episodes which were either the Doctor almost entirely absent or pretty Doctor light. It's pretty obvious as what they
were the best episodes.
Yeah, and it was pretty obvious as well that wasn't all narrative ideas or conceptions about how the series should be. It was availability of the actor.
Yes,
So that was an interesting thing to observe. I'm kind of hoping in the next series, Shooty's availability is such that he is a more central,
more prominent in the actual role because he is available. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. Now the thread, I knew the thread would deliver today, because it is going to be more of an organic debate. I tried to say to Simon the other day, who probably is thinking, is Brendan somebody I want to talk to? And I'm being honest. I'll put provocative thumbnails, but I actually don't know what I'm going to say, really. Hunter Callan says it's now become the Ruby Who show, right? So that's Hunter Callan saying, they're all companion-centric stories. Now, I think we were just saying 73 Yards is a really good story for Millie Gibson, but not for the Doctor. However, Sean Cryer says it's called Doctor Who, Brendan, but that doesn't mean he has to be the centre of everything. But I agree with that, Sean. The Doctor was never centre. I mean, his leadership model, Simon, was normally just to sit quietly and fidget with a gadget, press a button that nobody else knew how to press a certain way, and use his brain. He wasn't a military commander like the Brigadier.
Yeah, although, and I hope you don't mind, Brendan, I'm probably going a bit off track on this, just talking about the third Doctor, John Pertwee's Doctor, who had this kind of very sort of, and I know you've talked about politics, but had a very, very liberal perspective, apparently. And yet he was this grand figure that was a member of gentlemen's clubs.
Yes.
And dressed in a very elegant fashion. So that seems to me, quite a contradiction between a sense of what some of the writing was trying to do, but actually a characterization on screen.
I agree with that, because he always said, I know Tubby so-and-so, Tubby Rowlands.
Yeah, Tubby Rowlands, yes.
Somebody said in the chat, just I'll go back to what you said about how the Doctor was sometimes questioning himself more in New Who. I was trying to find the person to put it, but they said that Peter Davison's era, quite a few times he was also looking at himself and questioning what he was doing, more in the New Who kind of way of doing it. And I hadn't noticed that, but that's a valid point. Unfortunately, I can't find the person who actually put that.
I mean,
think that's a fair point.
I mean, please, if there's anything of interest, say so, because, I'll go off on one tangent, and this is the beauty of it. But I was thinking, if you're mentioning the Peter Davison Doctor, we've got a 61-year-old TV show. And of course, I think any showrunner, any producer, any writer, they want to bring a new aspect to it, don't they? They always want to challenge themselves.
Yes.
And so with a 61-year-old character, TV character, you're going to have bitten away at every facet of his persona, even changed his gender. I mean, they've tried everything, really. So yes, Peter Davison, let's try a young Doctor. Let's try that.
Do you think then that Doctor Who does have a limited duration format? Is there a point where every kind of idea and interpretation of this wonderful show can reach its point where there's nowhere else it can go? Does it have a limited duration? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, as it's lasted so long to date, hopefully not. I mean, it certainly felt like when we got to 1989 with the cancellation of the show, that felt like its end. And obviously it did have an off-screen life then, and very, very interesting off-screen life, but it kind of felt like we had reached the end then. One of the you sort of, Brendan, mentioned my longevity in fandom.
Sorry.
That's all right. I'm well, I can actually say I'm older than Doctor Who, but that doesn't mean I'm 2,000 years old. But one of the regular things that used to come up as a question at conventions in the 1980s was, why do you think Doctor Who has lasted so long? It was like almost a perennial question to almost anyone on the creative side of the program, and people gave various answers. And I'm afraid the obvious answer is it is an infinitely adaptable format with a character that you can change as much as you like. So long as the format and the character is able to constantly adapt to suit the needs of the time, then in theory, there's no reason why it shouldn't just continue on and on and on, possibly with the occasional rest. But I think the infinite adaptability of it means hopefully it should just be able to continue.
Right. Now, being a good teacher, I've wargamed that answer. And I saw,
Okay.
So I thought if Simon or Michael says this sort of answer, what's my next question? So my next question, Simon, given what you've just said then, and I take your point, of course I do. Are we arguing then that Doctor Who has, it's like Stretch Armstrong, it can be bent in any shape or form and still be Doctor Who? Is there not a point when it stops being Doctor Who? How far? We'll stick with the Doctor's character first, maybe. What, the Doctor's character can be almost anything according to a showrunner, or have we got some inflexible things here? I've got Sidney Newman up here, and I know we're going back to the beginning and things change, but Sidney Newman talked about, he wanted a male lead. I know it's the early 60s, a role model for boys. He wanted Ian Chesterton in there, and there was a reason why he set it up like he did. We also understand Andrew Cartmell's thinking. Andrew Cartmell was thinking we'd got too familiar with the Doctor. We knew his origins. We knew too much about him. So you wanted him mysterious and Machiavellian again. And that was in the late 80s. Jump another almost 40 years and you think, right, hold on a minute. Do we know too much again? And we need to go darker, more mysterious again, rather than emotional and an open book.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Well, I mean, just on so is the character infinitely malleable, infinitely changeable?
Yeah.
No. There is a core. There is a core to the Doctor. There's a core.
I agree.
And so that core has to be an interpretation of morality and decency.
Also, the Doctor should be recognisable.
Yes.
And this is why I think with the current iteration, the Doctor is no longer in many ways recognisable from any of the other previous Doctors that we've seen. This is one of my issues. Every one of the previous incarnations, there is something about the Doctor that's there. You recognise them, even though they've got different interests and different quirks. That's the one thing which I'm worried that we get to the point where the Doctor is no longer recognisable, and then no longer, for a lot of people, Doctor Who.
Yeah, and I think there are sort of I think you can stretch that, and I think sometimes when you change it and stretch it, you lose people, and that's been one of the things that's happened over the last well, probably since the program came back, where you have certain groups of fans say, well, actually, no, I can't have that. That can't be my
too much. Yeah.
So yes, I mean, I agree that as you play with the character, as you change it, you can potentially lose people. I mean, for some people, casting a woman, despite the fact you referenced Sidney Newman, and he did want to do that way back in the 80s, I think.
Yeah.
That for some people that was taking it too far.
Too far, yeah.
I mean, I don't agree. I'm perfectly comfortable with the Doctor being a different gender or a different or an actor of a different race, as it were, playing the character. I'm fine with that, but I do agree that you've got to have something which makes you think that is the Doctor.
The Doctor, recognizable. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
I mean, I asked two questions, and yes, you went for the first one, the malleable one. Yeah, fair dues. I forgot my second question, but I'll say John at the same time. Hello, welcome, John. John, meet Simon and meet Michael.
Hi, John.
So we've got. This is a full matrix repository now. My God, and I think, yeah. Sit down, everybody. Put your packed lunch down, because this is going to be really good Doctor Who debate, and you can already hear the merits of it. Because I'm asking two questions, you can only answer one, and then I'm forgetting the second one. There's loads to discuss. I mean, I do think, even if RTD's onto something, okay. Let's just say for a second he's onto something, and the Doctor needs to reflect the times, etc., etc. Maybe more emotional, could be a woman in the future, blah, blah, blah. Could be queer, whatever. But is he doing too much change too quickly? Because the Andrew Cartmel plan was just to make the Doctor mysterious and a bit more Machiavellian. And Remembrance started it, and it kind of started to kind of feed through into the stories. He did it over 2 seasons. This has been 8 episodes. Take 2 out because the Doctor wasn't there really. And I wonder if he's just doing too much change too quickly. You know, this is a more political Doctor. This is a very gay Doctor. This is a very Doctor very sensitive to racial issues. This is that. And it's like, oh my God, can we just have a good story, please?
Well, is it partly because they only do 8 episodes a season or a series? There's not a lot of episodes to work with. So perhaps he's rushed things a bit. If it was like a 13 or 14 episode series like they had when it came back in 2005, could they have done it slightly slower?
But then that would be my critique of him, and I don't want to just criticize, because I respect a lot of the work he's done, but he knew he had 8 episodes, so just don't overdo it, mate.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, John, I'm sure you've got things to say. Darker Doctor for 2024 dark times, or do we need a more emotionally sensitive one? You may have missed Simon, who earlier said we need different leadership models nowadays. So, where would you come in?
Darker Doctor, darker times. The times are always dark. The world, we're told, is in the worst position it's been since the end of the Second World War. But I grew up in the 80s. I'm a child of the 80s, and the whole pop culture and culture full stop was obsessed with the idea of Armageddon and nuclear Armageddon at that. Do I sense that the world is in any more a dangerous position then than now? No. Did Doctor Who need to reflect that? No. So I don't get what the current showrunner of Doctor Who is saying about that. In terms of what I have heard just in the last couple of minutes about he's doing too much too quickly, and perhaps he should slow his plan down. I'm not so sure that he has a plan. I think this is I think he's come back to make a statement. When he first brought Doctor Who back, the big thing was not to make him, a Doctor of class, if you like. The Doctor was always seen as middle class, Middle England, all of these things. And it was very important to Russell Davies that Anti-Christopher Eccleston at the time, the Doctor came back, and was very much accessible to everybody. So he spoke with a northern accent. He spoke in a language that, if you like, ordinary people spoke like. He wasn't a gentleman of a gentleman's club like the Pertwee Doctor, or a university postgraduate student, maybe like the Baker Doctor, a cricket player like the Davison Doctor, and a man of his words like the Colin Baker Doctor. So he very much wanted to break that mold, and I think that was fine. That was absolutely, but kept the Doctor very much still as the Doctor, and heroic figure out there battling for what he knew to be right. And Colin Baker always put this best: right doesn't always mean, just democratic or beautiful. It just is right, and the Doctor knows what is right for that particular time, place, planets, whatever. Nowadays, I think that the political messages and messaging is coming in front of everything else that exists there. So he doesn't have a plan, he has an agenda. And if the Doctor has to be gay, fine. If the Doctor has to be black, fine. That, does it trouble me? Only so much as it interferes with good storytelling. So if we stop everything and the Doctor has to point out to the fact that he's emotional, and we stop the shot to show a tear down the Doctor's face at length, over a period of time, over several scenes perhaps, that we get the Doctor to stop the action and talk particularly about, he now fancies Isaac Newton, or the rogue character in that awful episode, which was a lot of things, but what it wasn't was Doctor Who. So absolutely fine. But when the agenda, and I'll call it an agenda rather than a plan, stops good storytelling, and this is a message I've said for donkey's years now, when it stops good storytelling, then you have real problems in your hand. The whole Eccleston northern accent, more accessible working class, if you like, to use a broad term, Doctor, didn't interfere with the storytelling. We all still recognise him as very much the same character as Pertwee, Baker, Hartnell, because he had those traits.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not so much. So Russell Davies is a Doctor Who fan of many years standing. He must know this, because we know this. He must know this. Does he care? I'm not so sure, because he's control of the sandpit now.
But I feel as though we never talk about the actual stories now. You know, it's interesting when I do like the review of Remembrance of the Daleks. It was a good story, well put together. And the Doctor was woven into it, quite dominant, actually, on a leadership model front. He was pretty on it, and quite clinical and brutal at the end as well, to boot, when he committed genocide. I know he made Davros press the button, but you know what I mean. A story about racial purity, and the Doctor ensures the genocide of Skaro. A fascinating story. But when you come to, I mean, I've lost my thread. Classic. That's why I retired. No, no, sorry. There's so many.
Go lie down.
I know. I'll have a lie down after this. But the thread. That was it. I was talking about stories, wasn't I?
Yeah.
I don't feel as though we talk about great story writing now. The story seems to be the companion, or the story seems to be the Doctor's having a bit of a breakdown this episode. It's not about, or having a crush. It's not about a great science fiction concept. It's not about some great exploration of another world that reflects maybe our society now. And so you do that lovely science fiction hypothesis bit. I sometimes wonder if there's a dearth of good science fiction writers out there, and so what we get is a lot more soap, space opera.
Why is Russell T Davies then? Why has he forgotten that? Why is it that? Because when he brought it back in 2005, I enjoyed it. I mean, I know everybody didn't like it, but it was quite popular. I think it was. Why has that been forgotten? I mean, he wrote almost all the episodes of the new series, apart from I think 2. And most of them weren't very, very good. So what is it that is it just because he thinks, as you might indicate, that I want to get my message across, that's more important for me as rather than the Doctor facing a monster and defeating it? I mean, I don't know. It's just, I don't know why he would have forgotten the basic elements of Doctor Who if he's a fan.
I tend to think that is the case. Sorry for cutting across, Richard, but I tend to think that is the case, because it's fairly obvious that he is out of ideas story-wise for Doctor Who. For example, I love the Russell Davies finales. They were always we didn't have series finales in Doctor Who. and as such, certainly not the modern type. And I love what he did with those. I love the Daleks, the Cybermen, the Daleks and the Cybermen, the Master, and then the whole world, and Uncle Tom Colby coming back at the end of the Dawn and Opal season. I loved all that. You get a real sense of
Was good, yeah.
jumping from off the chair. But you look at the most recent season, and it's essentially the same premise. Something's coming back. He is returning. It is returning. So he's out of ideas. So you have to question, if he's out of ideas and out of good storytelling, and having looked across the season, there's not an awful lot of good storytelling. What was his motivation for coming back? And I think his motivation for coming back was the pursuit of an agenda. As a skilled, well-respected TV writer in general, but well-respected amongst Doctor Who fans through in the main, he's seen the Doctor Who programme as an opportunity of his way of accessing the younger generation and making a political statement, of playing to that audience. And if he loses all fans, well, we can all go touch grass apparently, and that's fine. Okay. But he is using the programme as a vehicle for the message to speak to either people he believes have a similar attitude to him, or to people who he wants to have the same attitude as him. Either way, what's coming second is good stories, good storylining, and good plotting and characters. That just seems to have been.
So is that
an example of that is Space Babies. To start a new season, to open that up to people, and to make that typical of Doctor Who, is just an absolute nonsense. Because it might have been typical of many things, but it certainly wasn't typical of Doctor Who.
Well, I don't understand why he would have actually started with such a weak episode. I mean, surely once they had actually filmed it, saw the talking CGI mouth babies, whatever it was, and it was, I think it's most people panned it. They thought this is really a really bad start. And as we all know, Doctor Who, when a new Doctor comes along, it's that first. I know he had a Christmas one before that, but it's the first episode of a new season with a new Doctor. Really, is when people are going to say, "Oh, there's a new Doctor. Let's check it out," and then you see him with the bogey monster, whatever it was, and the CGI, babies. Yeah. It's going to put him off.
I'm wondering if the dearth of good stories means we are having time to focus on the warts and all of the Doctor and the Ruby and everything. Everything's therefore slower. We just we have time to have this scene where they talk to each other and all the rest of it. Whereas if you have a good story, a good corridor chase, I must sort this out before the end of episode 2 cliffhanger, we're just moving along with the yarn. As it is, there's a lot of emotional character dialogue moments. And so you've got time to think, oh, why are we doing this? Oh, that's a political virtue signal. Oh, that's that. Oh, that's that. Whereas I counted, didn't I, Michael? 9 political statements were made in remembrance of the Daleks, but it was so well woven into
it was a natural part of the story. It was just it was entwined weaved in perfectly, and that's why it works so well. You don't get that in New Who. You get it's like a sledgehammer.
Yes.
Dot and Bubble was making a point about ageism, and it had its racial message. And if I was being fair, there might be a third one, but Remembrance of the Daleks had 9, and I'm sure there were more. But again, I had to look for them. I had trolls saying to me, Brendan, Remembrance of the Daleks hasn't got politics in it. And I thought, well, I'm glad you were entertained, but yes, the story came first.
Yeah.
But within it.
But does that relate in any way to the way television is made now? I mean, are there other programs where the politics is in there, but it's more subtle, like you were saying, Brendan, about Remembrance of the Daleks, or is everything on television now much more in your face?
I think there's a fair point. It generally is a bit more in your face, not just Doctor Who. I think. Mind you, I don't watch a lot of live TV, so I don't know whether that is the case. Actually, thinking about it,
I
don't. As I answered that question, I actually thought, maybe I'm
because I don't want the Doctor to be like the Twitter Doctor, as in everything's laid out there, antagonistic. You love him or hate him. That's Twitter, isn't it? You want a nuanced Doctor. I'll buy into everything Simon said about the different leadership models nowadays to be shown, and not necessarily. You put it better yourself, Simon. So I'll let you finish off the sentence. But the point was, the Doctor can be a very different creature now. I grant that, but the way it's presented, it's very much messaging and very everything's laid on a trowel, which is very like Twitter and that, where people either freak out at what you say, get angry with it, or go totally with it. And what I'm saying is we're polarizing. It's polarizing dialogue, polarizing programs, polarizing productions. And so, yes, as Simon said with his question, I do think it reflects that TV's changed. The trouble is, it's going to make fandom is fractious. Surprise, surprise. Now, I know, Simon, you will tell me, well, it always has been a bit, Brendan, Deadly Assassin, and everybody kicked off. But
I didn't. I loved it.
But yeah, but I don't know. Has debate gone? I mean, are we just trying to bring it back on this show? I mean, to me, sometimes people feel as though, no, we can't do debate. You're in my camp or you're not. And I sometimes sense the program's going down that, go and touch grass, as you said, John.
Yeah.
If you don't like Doctor Who now, you've been told by the lead actor to clear off. You think,
I feel, you know, the program will go through phases where, as I think I probably said before, it's going to lose some of its audience. But I think the important thing is that it needs to continue to evolve, and you don't end up excluding significant chunks of your audience for permanently. So I don't really mind if it takes different styles, different approaches, and sometimes some people will like it more. I mean, I'm going to be quite honest with you. As I said, I've been watching it since you know, the 60s, and there were times when I went off it.
Yeah.
So I was not so keen on the Colin Baker era. In retrospect, it's a lot better than I thought it was.
Yeah.
But at the time, I didn't enjoy it, and I missed initially on broadcast some of the Sylvester McCoy era because I just thought, well, it's not going to get any better, is it? So I kind of accept there are going to be some times when some elements of the audience are going to be put off. What I don't want to see is people being so put off that they think their program is just gone forever.
Yeah. Can I put this? I know, John, can you try and hold your thought, John? I want to put this to the panel and then see what the thread think, which is on fire, by the way. I'll have to say hello to the thread in a minute. Okay, then let's put it this way. Then I agree with you, Simon, that when you've watched Doctor Who for so long as a fan, there are moments you start to lose a bit of the faith. Yeah. Either it's not your doctor and all the rest of it. Now, let me go and explore that for a moment, because this might help us in this debate today about what type of doctor. So if you could look back over your time as a Doctor Who fan, which doctor was really not the doctor for you? And then we might explore why, and then we could maybe look at now what the situation is. So, Michael, is there a doctor where you just didn't gel?
I found it quite tough with Sylvester McCoy when he took over. I was a bit. I'm in the minority, but I did like the Colin Baker era, and so when he came along and his first episode with the Rani, some of the things he did with that. Obviously, you got to give a chance for a doctor to get into their role. It just felt like it was much darker in the Colin Baker era, and this was a bit more family friendly, a bit lighter, and it came across as a bit less serious. And when his season 24 was, I think it was the weakest of the 3 seasons he did, I did feel a dip in my interest in the show at that point. I did stick with it, and he did improve in the last 2 seasons, but that was my dip because I've always watched it new from the 80s. That was my dip, but I did come back.
You came back, you liked the darker version.
Yeah.
Right, so I'll come back to you on that a bit later. So, John, I know you had something else to say, but did you ever lose the faith? Was there a doctor that jarred with you a bit?
No, never. There are some doctors I prefer to others, but I watched Doctor Who religiously. Throughout, up until 1989, from when I was old enough to watch it, until they stopped making it in 1989. There were doctors I preferred, some doctors I had a yen for, which were gone. And there's my favourite doctor, Tom Baker, always will be. I can't imagine him ever being usurped. But there was never a doctor I fell out of love with, or stories I particularly liked, eras I particularly didn't like. But they were also recognisably the doctor to me, and this is the issue here, harks back to something that Simon was talking about there, about not liking a particular doctor. The problem with the current doctor is that he's not recognisably the doctor.
That's my problem.
That's the problem. And I'll give you Exhibit A. I hate to bring it back to Rogue again. People have been told is a fabulous story. And I dare say in another circumstance, in another genre, it is. But when a character who we've known and loved for over 60 years suddenly goes chasing around after another person, I don't care if it's male, female, I'm a gay man myself, but suddenly goes chasing around after another person with his tongue hanging out, that belongs somewhere else. It's not why the Doctor exists. It's not why the program exists. The Doctor may well have had his heart broken by River Song in the past, or Kamika, or lots of good women who may have been good looking, apparently, in the past. I don't know. But the story wasn't formulated around that premise with a bit of alien menace thrown in just to prove, yes, this really is Doctor Who you're watching, folks, when it was absolutely, a sideline issue. And the promise made to Ruby Sunday's mother by the Doctor, don't worry, I'll take care of her.
Yeah.
While he was hanging around in bushes, waiting for his boyfriend. That's a completely different show. And it really undermines the character. Doctor is ultimately a family show. Ultimately, if we're all, ultimately admit it, ultimately a kids at heart show. That storyline doesn't belong in there. And while the Doctor can show some aspect of falling in love, getting close to falling in love, having a yen for love, even finding someone attractive, that's all fine in the modern iteration of Doctor Who. But what isn't fine is to have the whole story around that issue. You're writing for a completely different program.
Never done that before. They've never done that before.
Because it's not Doctor Who anymore.
No, that's why it's terrible.
It's a lightweight story. There's not much story to that. We Doctor Who
fans, afterthought, Brendan. The creatures, the threat to Earth, it's all afterthought. And there is carnage around the Doctor. People are dying, and the Doctor doesn't give a monkeys. He's too busy running around. At the end, he smiles and nods winkingly at the camera because he's fallen in love.
Ruby Sunday only lived in Rogue because she thought for herself and she was savvy. And actually, she was saved again by Rogue and not by the Doctor. So there were two moments when she was in jeopardy and twice the Doctor failed. And
Brendan, at the same time, the showrunner is feeding us the line that this is one of the most entrancing or best, I can't remember the adjective he used, but one of the best and most entrancing episodes of Doctor Who this season, or any season for that matter. Yeah, that it may well have entranced millions, although it didn't.
No.
It may have entranced thousands. Fine.
Well, he's
so I guess he did love story with Ryan O'Neill in it, but it's not Doctor Who.
I think it entranced about 10 people. I think 10 people would have liked it out there.
Well, as Mike Disney says, and I'll come to Simon now, but Mike Disney says, how is that leadership? Now, you mentioned the leadership, different models, Simon, and we've got I think it's a fair question, isn't it? Which is, if listening to what John said about Rogue and that, how is that? If this is the type of leader RTD thinks should be put on TV screens now, how does that, how does that work?
It didn't particularly. So I don't think that's a good example of the model that I was talking about.
Yeah.
So I think whatever else one might enjoy about that particular episode, that fundamental aspect of leadership, I think it's a fair criticism. I don't, by the way, think it's wrong necessarily for the Doctor occasionally to fail in I talked earlier about, we were kind of asking, is the character infinitely malleable? Is there an essential core? The essential core is a form of morality. And I don't think it's wrong necessarily for the Doctor to fail in his or her interpretation of morality, his concept of it. But I suppose what your criticism, John, and others is that was probably a fairly trivial thing to fail over. So I think that's a fair point.
I mean, if I threw in sorry, and the question I still haven't asked you, Simon, I apologize for that, is I was asking, when did you fall out of Doctor Who, maybe? Just for us to understand, is there a type of Doctor or iteration that you were less comfortable with?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of said it already, which is that it was the Colin Baker Doctor who, I mean, this probably is going to sound a bit trivial, but I can't even begin to tell you how much I hated that costume.
So did Colin Baker. He hated it himself.
I know he did. I know. And one of the things that I didn't like about John Nathan Turner's conception of Doctor Who is that he constantly tried to put the Doctor into costume.
Question mark.
Yeah. Whereas actually, I think that one of the great things about the Doctor prior to that point is the costume kind of emerged organically to reflect the Doctor's character. Mm-hmm. But I thought Tom Baker's last season, I actually loved that costume, but it was a costume.
Yeah.
And you didn't think of Tom's Doctor as
and that was John Nathan Turner's first year, wasn't it? So he was.
That was his first, and I did enjoy that season. But then Davison, even more of a costume.
Yeah.
And then by the time we get to Colin Baker, I'm sorry, I'm being a bit trivial talking about costumes because
what about current Who though, where obviously the 15th Doctor is wearing a different costume every episode?
Yeah, no,
the other end of the scale, isn't it?
Yeah, I find that strange. I don't really mind. I quite like the idea of the Doctor changing their costume a bit to suit the circumstances now and again, but I did find that odd.
Because that's one of the. I mean, obviously, you've said that there's a negativity about them being costumes in the 80s, which is fair enough. But at least you would recognise a Doctor just by their
silhouette.
Their silhouette. Yeah, exactly.
You recognise them. You recognise them by their character and the way they present themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that does include how they're dressed.
Yeah, but the new Doctor, you haven't got a clue what he's going to.
And on that front, Michael, obviously I've done saloons on this where Pam Downs, who's the costume designer, has obviously been told from on high that there need to be gender pushing, societal pushing outfits as well. Mm-hmm. And when he was in San Diego, Artie did say about the costumes that he thinks that if one week he's wearing an orange duffel coat like in 73 Yards, and in another week he's got a leather jacket on and a white vest another week, then any kid in the world can think I'm the Doctor if they had a white vest but they didn't have a duffel coat. He thinks it's more accessible. I'm not too sure.
I don't think it works.
Yeah, isn't that what Peter Capaldi said about his outfit initially? That it was very simplistic, a black jacket, white shirt, button to the top, almost Pertwee-esque in season 7. That he wanted it to be as simple as possible, so children specifically could dress up at him, at a minimum cost, So that was a very kindly thing to do. Now we have the catwalk Doctor, we have the Doctor wearing almost sort of designer clothing, stopping there, and I think this has been done particularly to appeal to Ncuti Gatwa, and the emotional side of it is appealing to the actor more so than it is in, if you like, responding to what is the Doctor's character. So there's a bit of a scratch up going on there. Ncuti should have been written perhaps a bit more generically, and then if his Doctor has become quite emotional and become a dedicated follower of fashion, then that could have emerged as it went along. But it was imposed from the start, almost John Nathan Turner-esque in terms of the Doctor being the costume in this essence being a catwalk model. But can I go back briefly to what Simon said about Colin Baker and the costume? Interesting, Colin Baker was the first Doctor, although I loved all the Doctors, but he was the first Doctor whose behaviour, when script edited by Eric Saward, was said at the time by most of us fans to be not the Doctor.
Yeah.
Because Colin Baker was seen to be reveling in the misfortune of others, to be, in terms of Avenger and Varus being a very good point. What's been reported over the years now is not really what happened in Avenger and Varus. Go and look at it. The Doctor he doesn't revel in the fact that someone has fallen in acid, but I can understand why that conclusion was met. But that was the first time perhaps where the Doctor, because he was script edited by a script editor, Eric Saward, who didn't particularly like the Doctor, this Doctor was writing for him. Right. Now we have a Doctor who's not been, again, acting unlike the way the Doctor should act, but doing so on a more regular basis. And this, specifically when you have an old episode, I hate to bring it back to Rogue again, but the whole season was like this. When you have that, that's where the clash is going on, because this may well be Doctor Who, called Doctor Who, but I'm not sure the central character is the Doctor anymore.
I just want, if you don't mind, just I kind of talked about Colin Baker and majored on the costume, but that wasn't my only. That wasn't my only concern. A major concern I had was I didn't like the Doctor.
Yeah,
I found him arrogant and aggressive.
Unfamiliar as well.
Unfamiliar, just an unpleasant character, and I kind of regret that I didn't like Colin Baker's Doctor, because I really like Colin Baker.
yeah.
I think he's a really, really nice bloke, and listening to his audio Doctor, it's much, much better. I think poor Colin Baker was served badly by his time in Doctor Who, and treated badly by the BBC as well. So I kind of regret that I had such a downer on him at the time, but it was the character and the costume. And I also felt at the time that Doctor Who, the production values and the way they were making it was just so old-fashioned, and it just no longer worked.
One person said, Captain Hab Fun said,
Yes.
one thing that's really weird is that the 14th to the 15th Doctor, when the 13th to the 14th regeneration, the actual clothes changed.
Yeah.
Now, what was that all about?
There was I mean, I don't think if it's even been said, but I think a lot of definite speculation has been that it was because you had Jodie Whittaker's Doctor turning into David Tennant, and he didn't want to disrespect David Tennant as an actor to make him for a moment or two wear female clothing.
Imagine that, a man in woman's clothing. Imagine.
No,
I mean, was he being told? Imagine.
I know.
Was he going to offend people? I don't understand that.
Well,
I think John Percy would have sloshed you with his bucket, if you remember the bit in, I think, Green Death.
Yeah. the thing about when we come back to costume for a second is these are all choices nowadays. We've mentioned the JNT era with the question marks. I've seen that there was a joke in I've forgotten who it was who said, don't put question marks on yourself if you're full of secrets. But I try and be consistent, but as a fan, you're blind to some things. But I really was angry about Devil's Cord with the nod and wink to itself as if the show's smiling at itself. I can't stand it when Doctor Who does that. But the truth is, in a lot of the 80s era, the question marks and the question mark umbrella is a nod to itself. And, so consistently, I never liked that. I don't like Devil's Cord. Those two are true.
I don't think those were artistic choices in the 80s. They were very much merchandising opportunities. GNT, while everybody disliked a lot of the stuff he did and wasn't really a stories man, he was a man for publicity and for merchandise, and he knew exactly what he was doing. And the real reason the question marks were introduced, and June Hudson talks about this in many of the interviews she has done, saying that she was asked to do something that she didn't want to do, put question marks on the season 18 Tom Baker shirt. The reason being the GNT gave her for merchandising possibilities he wanted to put out there as a potential thing to sell to the public. And after that, it ran straight through. So JNT gave himself away a bit, because that essentially, you're right, a man full of secrets doesn't wear question marks on his lapels. It was very much against the character. But he was very much a showman, very much a merchandiser. That's what he wanted to do with the character and see opportunities. And we benefited from that sort of attitude because Doctor Who probably went on a little bit longer than it might have done had it not been for GNT's stewardship. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's a good thing personally. Otherwise, we wouldn't got the Dark Doctor, Sylvester McCoy's years. A lot of people would rather it finished earlier. That's also fine. But he did keep it going, and it was done through a sense of it having a high profile, merchandise, and all this sort of stuff going on. But yeah, it's not a particularly good look for a man who is apparently full of secrets and trying to blend in with his surroundings.
And you don't want to be disrespectful to David Tennant wearing female clothing for a second, but you're happy to launch the 15th Doctor in white undies. And again, I really don't know. The choices are, and I think this is where my red line in the sand. And I had a good chat with Simon the other day before sorting out today, when Simon, you did say you're quite happy for the Doctor to keep changing the program because it needs to evolve, and we can't own it. A new generation needs to come through, and I agree with all of that. And I'm not being proprietorial or anything, but my red line in the sand really is the Doctor isn't sexual, and the Doctor isn't a sex object.
That's
and
right.
and the undies, was more than just seeing John Pertwee in the shower, if you get my gist, in Spearhead. It was more than that. And it's gone on more than that in this season. So basically, my fears could have been poo-pooed, but they weren't, as John has said with Rogue as an example. They are red lines, and I know we mentioned the malleability of this Doctor, but can you, three lads there, can you give me a red line you possibly could have regarding the Doctor's character?
Oh.
I'm thinking.
While you're thinking, I'll just say, for example, the David Tennant Doctor did the Time Lord Victorious for a while. He went rogue for a moment in Invasion of Time. Remember episode 1? The fourth Doctor looked as though he was a traitor. We have had the moments, of course, and then we go back to type. What? I mean, so yeah, my crossing the line is not to have a sexual Doctor. I think if you have a moral leader, a hero who is compromised in the ways that John said, to the point where he endangers people.
I think Rogue is crossing the line for the actual characterization of the Doctor. I'm sorry to say so. I know it gets mooted a lot and talked about a lot, but I've just, like I said, that wasn't the Doctor. The Doctor's never done that, and I remember watching. I thought, what the hell? I was just in absolute disbelief of that episode, just for this character I've watched since I was a kid, and just the way he was acting just wasn't the Doctor. That was crossing the line for me.
It is, Brian, I'm the same as you. It's the sex thing. I'm trying to think of something, some second red line, but it is sexy Doctor. The Doctor is not beyond that. And if it is, if you start to tinker with that core, then you're creating a different program. You're just doing
it's a different character.
The whole idea is the Doctor is out of time, out of current trends, out of, when you look back through, the swinging 60s or the drug-induced 70s, whatever's going on, Tom Baker, John Pertwee, Patrick Troughton, they stood apart from all of that. They never really, they were men out of time, and the Doctor's line from City of Death, which is evidence there on the picture above me, when he says you're a very attractive woman, probably, exactly sums up with the Doctor's too busy with whatever adventure we join him on at that particular time to be running around.
I think that's part. I think that's been part of the deal.
And then when you contrive whole episodes, once you give the Doctor a motivation about wanting to fall in love, wanting a sexual relationship, wanting to settle down with someone, you begin to contrive whole episodes around that, which has now happened. And that means you're not writing.
Another aspect is that the Doctor goes on and on and on. That's part of the reason why the Doctor doesn't.
The whole thing about Rose and Sarah Jane, the why he leaves us behind is because he can't see why he leaves.
He'll outlive them.
Yes, I thought that was absolutely fine. That's a great explanation. Julie Whittaker herself talked herself about being a mountain range, while her companions were all nice and well written, and absolutely getting the point of the Doctor. Interestingly, that episode not written by Chris Chibnall, the hack, but at the same point, now we have the Doctor happy to fall in love on a whim. When he's supposed to be this ethereal, out of time character, where if there is a potential for the Doctor to fall in love and be with someone, it's with a race who are now apparently dead or we've yet to meet.
And it did make more sense when RTD went down that road with, in School Reunion, the David Tennant Doctor talked to Sarah and said, you all die. I can't fall in love with any of you. But I'm just saying that this is the point. Even RTD's raised it himself. So it's like...
Well, against his own writing in previous examples.
As we keep saying, and we don't want to prove it, RTD1 and RTD...
They're like two different people.
Very different.
Yeah.
I can think of another one though, as well as my red line, and I'm like I said, I'm not being proprietorial, but there's some no-go areas, and the other one is, remember with Colin Baker, the regeneration crisis when he was violent. That we knew it had a context, it was a moment, but it was a problematic moment, and they would never really risk that now with him attacking a female companion.
No, that's a really interesting point, though, because for many, many years in Doctor Who, there was the idea, well, it didn't develop at first, but it became an idea that the Doctor wouldn't use violence and that the Doctor wouldn't use a gun.
A gun, yeah.
But the program's been completely inconsistent
Yeah.
on that. So generally, the Doctor wouldn't use violence. The Doctor wouldn't use a gun. They would use their wits and intelligence to defeat the foe. But part of the
that does like it's contradictory. I mean, I rewatched Earthshock the other day, and the Doctor shoots the Cyberman in the chest 3 times separately.
Yeah.
Like again and again and again. Again, it's contradictory to I never carry a gun. I'm So as you say, there are contradictions in the show, but like I said, I guess after 60 years, it's going to have some of that.
So I'll ask the question in another way. It's all about the Doctor, dark, emotional, whichever version we say. But there's been a segment, and I'll just have the 10-second element, and I'll twist it. So give me a moment of indulgence. Right, my Time Teak Roadshow element, John will remember from ages ago. It was normally when I had a load of items and what we would bring back. And so if we'd just seen a Cybermen episode, we'd talk about which era of Cybermen you bring back. This is going to be different. Which aspect of the Doctor are we not seeing now that you would like to bring back on personality front?
All of them.
I mean, one of the things like I said, I started watching during Tracton, then remember a lot of poetry. But my favorite Doctor was Tom Baker.
Right.
And I think an element of Tom Baker's Doctor's character that I loved was the really strong sense that he was an alien and had a different conception of things to the human race. So I would major on that, emphasizing the alien nature of the Doctor. And we were talking a few minutes ago about sexuality and Tom Baker's Doctor having no concept of what it even meant. And so that further emphasizes the alien nature of the Doctor. So I'd major on.
I would agree entirely. Exactly the same thing. That is the alien factor of the Doctor. He's not a human who falls in love. He's an alien, and he has an alien perspective because he's an alien, and that is often what seems to be forgotten about in 2024. He's just like a generic time traveler human almost, rather than an alien. Bring back some of that perspective from an alien looking at humanity, looking at Earth.
Yeah.
And that's what's missing so much in the current iteration, which I really don't like.
Because you can get away with more. Science fiction, as you know, is normally hypothecating about something that's going on in modern society at the time. H.G. Wells did it all on the class system. But you need to have that alien gives you that beauty as a writer, as you say, Michael, to actually just commentate possibly. But in the way, I'm going to go back to Plans of the Daleks. I mean, the John Pertwee Doctor was moralizing throughout that. He was telling the Thals about leadership. He was talking about war. What was that great line he was telling La Tepa? Because he was saying something like, don't go back and make this glorious, didn't he?
Yes.
He said,
when you go back, you'll all be heroes.
Yeah.
Tell them about the ones who won't be coming back. Yeah,
exactly. That's it.
Right.
That's the level of it. That's great leadership. It's just a lovely little scene. It's a lovely little moment. But with 6 parts, you can indulge in that. With a 45-minute wham bam, thank you, ma'am, you can't, and that's a mistake.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately what's been wrong recently in Doctor Who. For example, back to the guns thing. The Doctor being or using non-violent means to achieve his ends or her ends became the Doctor doesn't use guns. Although quite evidently, as you mentioned there, Richard in Earthshock, the Doctor's using a gun.
Sure.
But what latterly has happened in Doctor Who recently is the Doctor will quite happily not use a gun, but will quite happily put a gun in someone else's hands and allow them to use it. That's not the Doctor. The Doctor, we remember, Tom Baker Doctor, snatching guns out of people's hands and condemning them for using the gun. There's a better way than this. So that again, the Doctor, though being alien, perhaps being more humane in a conundrum type way than a lot of humans would be to their species in terms of not using violence. But I have to agree with the gents here. It is about that alienness, and Tom Baker typified that better than any other Doctor. But even when the Doctor was most human-like or most English-like, as John Pertwee was, being a member of a club and wearing the velvets and frills, a gentleman in the 70s and all that. Even then, he still managed to be different, to be apart, to look and sound, and in terms of his attitude, be different. One of the big giveaways, and it's not just about the current iteration, but you look back to one of my favourite Modern Who stories in the Satan Pit with David Tennant's fabulous story, very creepy, very doom-laden, very atmospheric. But during the course of that, David Tennant cracks a joke which is very EastEnders related, and I know this because I saw it quite recently, when he talks about, it's like the best Christmas Walford's ever seen, which is a Christmas trope they have in EastEnders where they all hope for the best Christmas ever, and then of course somebody dies, gets pushed off a building, gets poisoned by a Queen Vic Savoy, I don't know, but something happens anyway. But for the Doctor to know that makes you think that, is the Doctor sitting down at some point every Tuesday and Thursday putting on EastEnders?
That was the bit
above all this, and I found that all a bit just.
And it also dates it. Remember, that was the bit in Rose. Remember when the Chris Eccleston Doctor was flicking through the magazines and he knew all the celebrity news? And it was like, oh gosh, he goes through TV quick in the TARDIS. He obviously goes through everything. Who's marrying you in Coronation Street? It was like, really?
I've got a question for you, gents. Do you think the Doctor should always be British, whether it's in a different part of the UK?
A lot of Americans say yes, don't they?
I say so too. I think so too, yes.
Because obviously Shooty's not really... Well, I mean, is he supposed to be... Because
he's a Rwandan Scot.
Yeah, but so he is supposed to be a Rwandan Scot. So he's still supposed to be British. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I asked Rachel, our actress panelist, because I asked about the accent. I was using my English teacher thing, and I was thinking I can't detect the dialect accent and what's going on here. She said she detected 3 accents going on. There was Rwandan, Scottish. I mean, she was more technical than that, and there was an element of London. There were 3 things going on, and it's blurred together. It is a strange mix, but I think what everybody's noticing is the honey and the babes, and this kind of
which is in the script. Yes. Yeah. So, but Brendan, you've hit on I think what for a lot of people would be a secret red line. Should the Doctor be British?
That's what I'm wondering. Yeah.
But for many people, they would say so. My view is, in theory, no, but actually, that is how the character has always been.
So is that another factor with the Shooty? Because if he has the Rwandan side of him, do you think that might be slightly off-putting the characterization of the Doctor?
No, just general.
Yeah, I mean, people will say the same about James Bond, that James Bond should be English.
Right.
But actually, several of the actors who played have been Scottish or Australian or Welsh. When's the next really Welsh Doctor going to come along then?
Yeah, the Scots. The Scots are trouncing it at the moment, aren't they? Can I just say, by the way, Doctor Who started with William Hartnell, and when you look back, whether you were there at the time or whether we've watched them later, Unearthly Child, if you've still got a copy, thanks to all the chaos. But I have to say, I know I wasn't there at the time, but I would have really fallen in love with the intrigue of that character. The Doctor being so alien, couldn't give a damn about these companions at the beginning, was so dismissive of them and scathing of them. And I actually want that Doctor now in 2024. I think that is be cold and clinical when need be. He has his own agenda. Come on. I mean, if you're going to reflect 2024 and everybody's narcissistic and obsessed with their own identity and everything, have a Doctor who's just bothered about his own agenda. I like
that a bit with Capaldi, I think, and the character of Clara trying to civilize him and give him the post.
I love their dynamic, those two.
Social circumstances. I don't think you could go back to that. That's how modern television works. It has to be heartwarming. People have to relate to the character. And eventually, if you think about it, even Hartnell himself had to soften within a few stories. They were beginning to soften that side of the character. So I don't think that builds in longevity to your format to have an anti-hero of the type that Hartnell was initially. But I get what you're saying, Brendan, and I think that's been tried again. Although they had their fingers burnt with Capaldi and they had to start lightening him up to make him. I think what they were more likely to do. If they want a doctor who's odd and has odd behaviours, they're more than likely these days in their quest for diversity to make him in some way on the spectrum and have it described in that way. And there's absolutely nothing wrong in that, but that's probably the way they would
It's
get
just-
there these
just
days.
Don't you worry that Doctor Who's turning into Strictly Come Dancing, where they make sure that they've got a dancer who's got this problem, this problem, this problem, this
That's a whole
problem, this
television
problem,
beast.
this
I have never watched that show in my life, so I have no idea.
It's just that you see what's
me.
happening.
Nor
Write
me,
a good
Pat.
story. Yeah, write a good story, write a good character. But there seem to be, I can see it. They've got these pastel colours and they've got all these things that they need to pick. And so they're going, right. So they've got, they've had somebody who's been deaf in Strictly. It's this year a blind person. Look, these are terrible conditions and people need to see a role model in that way. But it's just to watch a dancing competition. It just seems fascinating that they're doing that. And the doctor thing, yes, I know what you're saying. They'll decide that we need to see some human condition next. And
I think the reason I mentioned that, I think that's more than the way modern television is written and presented. I would think if you wanted that more, if you like, awkward doctor with challenges, we'll describe it no more than that, then it would be done in a way that the doctor had to be not fixed, but the doctor had to be understood. And there's a way of doing that in the same way that nowadays, I in my school, I used to run a school, as you know, Brendan, and I had a language communication unit, which was for children on the spectrum as part of that school. And it was never a decision to make the challenges these children face that in any way had to be fixed, but we had to embrace that and understand and celebrate their diversity and the way they handle things differently and teach them perhaps how to behave in certain circumstances. So if we want the sort of Hartnell doctor or the Capaldi doctor at the beginning, I reckon they would dress it up in this some sort of way nowadays rather than having him fixed, or that idea of the doctor growing and maturing as he had to during Capaldi, because basically the ratings took it to, he wasn't as popular. But what they did, sorry to hog this, guys, but what they also did, which was what they probably do nowadays, was the whole thing about Capaldi being older, and the way that was handled was dreadful. And also to say that being old was in itself a terrible thing to happen to the doctor, at the same point as they were being virtuous with a whole lot of other things. So the way that was handled at the time was pretty dreadful. They misunderstood the character of Clara in the way they treated her and her reaction to the Capaldi doctor.
Can you see a time where we could have a future doctor which actually has a disability?
Probably, because I wouldn't be so surprised.
A wheelchair-based doctor. I'm being serious. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think. They certainly won't say that there's a bar there, will they? They wouldn't do that. But I mean, I have made an argument saying you need good stories. If that created good story writing, I would go with it.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
It's the story, but whatever this doctor is now, I haven't seen good stories from that. All I've seen is, some maudlin stuff.
There are ways to approach that sort of thing to do it more cleverly. For example, in a couple of episodes of the Capaldi's final season, he was blind.
Yeah. Yes,
that's
right.
Yes. Way of doing that. So temporarily the doctor has to rely on others and understand.
That was clever. That was well done.
Absolutely, it was clever. And that's probably the way of doing it. So if there comes a way the doctor loses the use of his legs, his arms, his hearing, his whatever, that's a better way of doing that, because that allows the audience to sympathise with a character who has lost the faculty that they too have and see how he copes. That's fine, as long as you say, Brendan, the story comes along with it and it's not just added on.
Yeah, which is the what I'm worried about. It'd be a sort of added on kind of thing, the actual disability rather than the story. You know what I mean?
And it's important that the production team don't just see this as a cash cow and actually just go, why are we making another season when we haven't seen RTD any good stories yet? Back to the drawing board. We need good stories. We're not just doing this because we've got a contract. I just wish you can see how a lot of production companies, they're churning them out now, aren't they? I mean, Doctor Who is a cash cow. Let's just keep making it. But you're going, but is there any... If RTD is honest, and I know we all play games at work and on interviews and everything, but if he was being honest with himself in the confessional Catholic booth, as I would when I was a kid, what does he say? The truth is, RTD, he says, I haven't got any really new stories. I think every story's been done about Doctor Who, but I'm sitting on a fantastic job and I'm going to keep churning it out.
Can I ask one question to the three of you? In terms of the cash cow question, I have yet to see, given the fact that Doctor Who is now backed by Disney, I've yet to see an upswing in merchandise, be it lunchboxes. I say I worked in schools when Doctor Who had his David Tennant, Matt Smith moment. Lunchboxes, sonic screwdrivers, little figures based on the monsters or creatures appearing in the programme. I've not seen anything, apart from that stuff that's normally out there to appeal to fans to go and buy. I've not seen anything hitting the high street or on the shelves of big supermarkets or toy suppliers saying that this is how to help with kids, and they can out and go and buy their Sutek, the up model or whatever. So is it a cash cow anymore? Are they making money, or are they just making the usual money of us?
There was a lot of merchandise in San Diego, and I showed a bit of it on my San Diego program. I mean, here's a bit. I've just been trying to find it. There you go.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we see.
You've got the shooty in his undies, and it's the regeneration box.
Who's that aimed at, though, Brendan? Is that for children or is that for fans?
Good question.
Yeah.
I mean, they're supposed to be cute because they've squashed them as a figurine, haven't they? So you see it better there.
Eddie Murphy, of course. Yeah, it looks like Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, he does look like it. Yeah. So I understand your question. I just thought I'll flash that up as an example. That's character options, isn't it? And we all know character options and what they're up to normally. But yeah, they've got them.
Where are the lunch boxes and the sonic screwdrivers and the weeping angels?
That was in the giggle.
Cyber masks, all that sort of stuff.
There was a lunchbox in the giggle, but you've missed it.
There isn't even much Doctor Who merchandise in Forbidden Planet, which is the London store.
Yeah.
So when did it decrease?
Not very much there.
When did it? I mean, obviously, it used to be quite a lot of merchandising in Matt Smith and David Tennant's era. So why is that? Is it because the ratings have gone down? There's just less interest generally, or how would they know that until the rating? I mean, I would have thought they would do it before they actually release the new Doctor.
When I've talked to people who have all the networks of people in merchandising, they've said there has been, and there's always a time-like effect anyway. People have been sitting on their hands because this is investment of money, isn't it? To come up with a new brand of toy or whatever. The Doctor Who brand has been limping, and yes, the specials came back in November. There's a time-like effect. Is this a successful series? Would you invest in it? Now, you're getting key rings and all the bits and the bobs, but I'm not seeing any big major stuff like, here's a TARDIS console model. Here's the big stuff.
Remember one of the big Christmas toys was the cyber mask, the children, the cyber voice.
Yes, I remember that.
15 odd years ago. There's a Dalek over there with remote control. Proper wish list Christmas stuff. I know Christmas is yet to come since this new series, but I don't think this series was particularly merchandise friendly. Nothing really came out of it to say, that will make a good thing for children to play with or to take to school with, which makes you wonder, are they too busy appealing to a certain other demographic rather than the one that will make them money? Well,
I showed this on Wednesday. That was my go-to in around 76, 77. That was it. Although some people said it was the Evil Knievel on that page, actually. That's what grabbed them. But I know what you're saying about the toys. Actually, since you're talking about merchandise and interest and whether it's been reflected, it's a lovely segue. I'm not very good at them, but here we go, because we've got Simon on, founder of Skaro fanzine, and I've got loads of them here. And you can see me, I was flashing them up. Simon, what made you decide to actually, a bit like we're saying with the merchandisers, and put money into it and put time into it and put love into it? What made you bother?
Fundamentally because I loved Doctor Who, and I had joined the Doctor Who Appreciation Society and the Doctor Who fan club in the mid 1970s, and I saw other people kind of producing things, and I thought I want to have a go at that. And it was a way of kind of, this was obviously way pre-internet. It was a way of connecting with people, asking people to submit ideas and articles and so forth. And I just enjoyed making it. I just enjoyed doing it. It took a lot. Well, I should say as well, by the way, that you've got two covers on the screen. I'm responsible for the one on the right, not the one on the left, because Skaro. Well, no, Skaro went through two eras really. I ran it from 1979 to 1985, and it
Right.
started off as a mixed science fiction fanzine, but quickly morphed into a Doctor Who fanzine. And then I finished it in 85, and then a couple of years later, it came back, run by Julian Chislett, Ness Bishop, and Brian Hudd. It was the same fanzine, but run by different people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, my supplementary little question was, by putting your head above the parapet, so to speak, you put opinions in print, you do reviews and all of everything. Did you start to hit that kind of fracture in fandom, the toxicity of this, the aggression that you've challenged something? What was it like then? Was it volatile? Was it difficult?
Yes, it was. There were very, very strong opinions around. And one of the things I wanted to do while I was running Skaro is provide an opportunity for people to share their opinions, whether I agreed with them or not. And quite often I would publish things which I didn't really agree with, but I thought it's great to let people have their say. There was a degree of aggression around it. I'm going to say, I probably shouldn't say this because I don't want to set the whole thing off again, but I will. Anyway. I published an opinion piece because there was a rumor around sometime in the early 80s that some fans had. Oh God, I can't believe I'm going to tell you this, but had episodes that were missing from the archives, right? So that rumor was going around, and it was a fact that some fans had bits and pieces that weren't in the archives, but actually they had them reasonably legitimately. I thought I'd write an article to try and flush people out, and I'm afraid it went somewhat nuclear after that. But it turns out one of the people who phoned me up to have a real go at me, I subsequently found out did have an episode that wasn't in the archives, which that person did return, but they didn't at the time I published that article.
Right.
Oh wow.
So it worked then, and by the by, didn't it? I mean,
I'm not sure I can claim anything. I was on that, and I was quite young and maybe a little bit naive and just thinking, I'll just publish some opinions here and see what people think.
It's a fantastic legacy when you look back now of an era. I mean, when we got talking the other day, you mentioned Skaro, we mentioned Lonleat, and all that stuff. I mean, John, when we first started, me and John were on a different stream. We used to talk about this and say, we want a channel where it's not an echo chamber, just like you said, Simon, that you sometimes printed articles and you didn't agree with them. Yeah, you wanted to reflect fandom. You didn't not reflect you necessarily. And I think we've done an example of that today. But John, I remember when we used to talk about fandom, I think you said you kind of avoided it and kept it at arm's length to a degree.
Yeah, for a long time. Yeah. Although I probably was in the society back when Simon, you were, our paths were well across without realizing, although most people say once they've met me, they don't forget it. Can't think why. But I used to purchase Skaro, and one of the beautiful things about fanzines back in the day was that they weren't instantaneous. You had to send your stamped address envelope. You had to send it away and have it sent to you. And there was the thrill of it popping onto your letterbox, the latest edition. Because while Doctor Who Magazine and Doctor Who Monthly or Doctor Who Weekly were all great and good and we loved them, the level of knowledge and detail that were in fanzines were designed for fans like us. You didn't have to go through the usual, newspaper or magazine type thing where you acknowledge that the audience may not know everything. You can go cut to the chase and cut to the detail. And there was some fabulous articles and reviews that were challenging. And although the names escape me now, there was some very controversial reviewers at the time, who wouldn't accept, if you like, the general popular opinion, for example, that Earthshock was good, and we'd talk about Kinda, which was rubbish at the time. But reviewers at the time who in fanzines who were intelligent enough and bright enough and smart enough to see what the virtues of and see beyond the plastic snake and see how wonderful Kinder as a story was, and write about that in the fanzine. And we're probably amongst the first really to be expressing that view of Kinder way before it became accepted fact that it was a pretty original, unique, and clever story. So fanzines I loved, and I would like to take this opportunity on a live stream to thank Simon for his contribution, not only to Skaro, but to the whole fanzine culture.
Yeah, me too. Me too, yeah.
For those of you who are younger and that, you're very lucky to have the internet now, but we were also lucky to have the level of detail and people like Simon who had a commitment to share the love of Doctor Who and their spare time, because there's no profit in any of these things, to share their love of Doctor Who and to make us happier by giving their time by investing in something for us to read. So from all those years ago, Simon, thank you very much.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Very kind of you. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, and I concur, because there's countless streams nowadays. In some ways, it's so much easier to do, but in those days, to put it together, to be bothered about it and pay out and like stamped address envelopes, sending them all, posting them, photocopying, or the bander, whichever versions you were using. This is crazy stuff, isn't it? And
Brendan, I'm sorry to cut across you yet again. Forgive me, but this is the difference between fans who love Doctor Who and certain of the types who are being catered for now, who Doctor Who's their passing fancy, their passing phase, something they'll pick up and put down, whether it's because of the Thasmin thing, or because it's a female doctor, or because the doctor cries, or whatever. These are people who pick Doctor Who up and put it down again and move on in a year or seasons too. What Simon and people like him did was real commitment to a program they loved, had loved for years, and continue to love. That's proper fandom.
Yeah. Well, Sean Cryer's, I need to put Sean Cryer in because he's got two contributions here, and he doesn't always agree with me and other people, but the point is we all are respectful, and it's great to have you. He says, I had a letter and an article featured in Simon's Skaro, so you've got that link there straight away. And then later on, he just says, Simon listened, unlike others at the time. And so, of course, it's quite shocking, isn't it, Simon, that you see the influence you have from a passion that you had, still have, how you manifested that passion, but that, there's even people on this show, people in the thread who actually remember something that probably, sometimes you were cursing doing. And it must be fantastic to see the legacy, and, when we did Remembrance, the ripple effect.
Yes.
Yes, it is very nice, actually, and quite flattering, because it is a long time ago. But I can tell you, actually, that I have still got all of my production files. So all of the letters people wrote me.
Wow.
All of people's initial drafts of articles and stuff, and all the camera-ready layouts. I've kept a lot of them. And what I also noticed I got a message on Messenger a few weeks ago from someone in the United States who said, "Oh, they've just bought Skaro in a bookshop in whatever town it was in the US," and they sent me a picture of it. And what was amazing to me was it was a bootleg.
Oh wow!
It wasn't actually something I had produced. Someone else had copied it and sold it. Now, I wouldn't mind my 10 pence or whatever my. But I don't really mind the fact that it's a bootleg, because, as you said, I didn't do it for the money. It didn't make it made enough money to run itself.
Yeah.
And it made enough money to continually, well, I tried to continually improve the production of it. And we later on were able to afford photographs from the BBC and pay the BBC license fee. Sorry, I'm slightly losing the train of my thought, but yeah, it was great fun to explore what we could do. Quite a lot of people involved in fandom at the time, well, quite a lot. Some people went on to have professional careers in the media or in television, but influenced by all those stuffy civil servants in the John Pertwee era, I became a civil servant and ended up as a senior civil servant. So I took a slightly different path.
Well, I was fascinated just while we're enjoying talking about being fans, for goodness sake, and the passions that are there, and actually how far you will go, because you were the streamers of your time, weren't you? Because, you were putting your head above the parapet, you were bringing people together. And, in some ways, technology makes it easier now, but you were doing it the hard way. You were the pioneers of this. And, that photograph you've got of John Pertwee reminded me of good old Lonleat. which you went to for the 2 days. These are my photographs, and yes, I was sat there watching Davison launch the blooming thing. There's the program. I know nobody can read it, but we rehearsed that like hell. I remember I was telling my dad, we're going in that marquee now, and we were diving around like mad. That's me, of course. It's been seen before, but that's me being attacked by a Sontaran. It's the only photograph. When photographs, you didn't take many. There's only one photograph of me at Lonleat. I mean, unbelievable. Now you'd take many, many more.
Yes.
But yeah, we're fans. And Troughton was there. I mean,
wow.
My dad kept elbowing me saying, that's Patrick Troughton. And actually, I didn't recognize him straight away. I was looking for Pertwee, he's so distinctive. There he is. There's Pertwee launching the thing.
As Tom Baker said, like a very tall light bulb.
Yes, exactly. So, yes, exactly. I mean, so, I'm just showing you this. So people who have been there, it'll bring back memories. People who haven't been there, you can have a quick gander. It all smelt of damp tent, didn't it, really, Simon? I mean, it was just, everything was smelt of damp tent to me. It was like a circus. And then, of course, we've all been to conventions, I assume. There we go. John was at that one, weren't you, John?
I was. That's not me on your show, on Sylvester McCoy's shoulder, however.
Yes.
Can I just add,
of course you can. Yeah.
Thing. Again, this is for anybody who's younger than us tuning in.
That's almost everyone, by the way.
Probably you're right. Yes, I know. You said that, so I didn't have to. The production of these fanzines at the time as well, and I knew someone who produced one, it wasn't the desktop publishing we have today. This is people with typewriters and I think old letraset, which people had to rub down, as letters you could buy and transfer it onto a sheet of A4. And then proper artwork, and you said you had to source photographs, which were copyright, had to be paid for. So it wasn't just as quick and easy to produce as you would on a laptop or a home printer. Now, these things had to be lovingly produced by typewriter and sellotape and blue tack and Pritt stick and letraset. They were a huge amount of time and effort for people to produce. So I just thought that was worth saying also.
Yeah,
but it was fun doing it. I mean, I remember one of the I came in for a lot of criticism because my fanzine was one of the first to go for proper typesetting. Because when I started, I was typing on a manual typewriter. That's really difficult. And then I got an electronic typewriter. Still not that easy. But then I started to get it typeset, which some people criticized me for, like a betrayal of fandom. But all I was trying to do was make it look better and better and better.
Yes, yeah. And some of those fanzines could have been on the shelf at W.A. Smith. They ultimately were very professional looking.
Well, Skaro did end up being sold in bookshops like Forbidden Planet and Forever People, and we exported it to the United States as well. So I remember Daystar Books. I think they were in New York. I can't remember. But we sold it in the United States as well. So the circulation towards the end of the time I was running it was 2,000 copies.
Excellent.
And you said regarding Lonleat the other day, you said, you asked whether you could hand some over to be sold in the merchandise tent, and you sold out on the first day. So it was like, this was like, honestly, it was.
The BBC said, if you send, we will sell your fanzines for you. So I sent them however many hundred, and they sold out very, very quickly.
Yeah. Well, there you go. I mean, we've only done 2 of these shows. Mine's are The Matrix, but that you can see everybody in a thread. With these panelists, you can go anywhere. You can talk forever. This is a classic with Doctor Who fans sat in a pub, but without any blooming lager. I mean, honestly, this is a cheap do. But this is how we wanted it, John, wasn't it? When we said we want the sense for you.
Yes.
It's Doctor Who fans just shooting the breeze, whatever comes up.
It's lovely. It's just lovely to have met and spoken to Richard and Simon today. That's absolutely lovely. It's lovely to share and hear other people's opinions. So, because too much nowadays is said in bubbles, where you don't wait for the response to what you've said. And this is a good way. And you're quite right, Brendan. The value of the sense sphere is that all views are welcome. You know, it's good.
And
Jokes.
Yeah.
go on, I thought you were going to say something then, Michael.
No.
No. Like I said, I mean, you know, I'm quite new to your channel as well, but I do. It's relaxing. I mean, I sort of like coming along here and talking to like-minded people about, you know, Doctor Who, and it's all because it's such a big kind of entity, isn't it? There's so much in it that there's so much to talk about, which is why I like. And
I do think there's an element of teacher still in me, which is going. If you go on Twitter, if you go on various forums, the anger and the venom, and you are in our tribe or you're not. And I have to say, come on, we're Doctor Who fans. It's a program only, life perspective. We surely can talk it through. Does everybody agree? What? I mean, I never agree with what John says. Does anybody agree with everything that John, Simon, and Michael has said today, including myself? No. But the point is, you can respect it. I have to say, did you notice early on when Simon said something about the leadership models, and I changed my stance somewhat? Isn't that the point?
Yeah.
Isn't that the point? So everybody, we've had a really good discussion. I'd love you all back. Please, please, please. I'll talk to you later. But of course, thank you for your time. I've enjoyed it. I'm sure the threaders has enjoyed it.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And I think it's time to go. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
See ya.